Let's take a look at the lesson for the week of June 23rd, adding and subtracting fractions. Now, you have added and subtracted fractions for several years, so this is going to be a review. So I want you to take some time, if you haven't already, look through the review that I provided you on how to add and subtract fractions with like denominators, add and subtract fractions with different denominators, and how to add and subtract mixed numbers. And there are going to be some other things that we'll work on in the video review as well. So if you haven't done that, pause the video, take a few minutes to go through the examples in the review, and then come back. Now that you've had an opportunity to review the notes that I provided you regarding adding and subtracting fractions, let's take a look at the video notes. We'll start with the simple ones. So adding fractions with like denominators, meaning the denominator is the same. Remember that the number on the top of the fraction is the numerator, and the number on the bottom of the fraction is the denominator. When you add fractions with like denominators, you add the numerators, so 2 plus 1 is 3. The denominator stays the same. We do not add the denominators. The denominator stays the same. Number 2, then, the denominator is 9, and so we're going to add the numerators. 2 plus 5 is 7. Denominator stays the same. Number 3, again we have like denominators. We have 5, so we add 12 plus 6. 12 plus 6 is 18. Denominator stays the same. Now, this time we have an improper fraction. Whenever we have an improper fraction in pre-algebra, we're going to change it to a mixed number. In order to change it to a mixed number, you can do this in your head or you can show the work if you need to. I generally just do it in my head. I say that 5 goes into 18 3 times. 5 times 3 is 15, so 18 minus 15 is going to be 3. There'll be 3 left over, and the denominator stays the same. If you need to show some work, you're going to put your numerator inside, your denominator outside. 5 goes into 18 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15. 18 minus 15 is 3. So here's your whole number, 3. Here's your leftovers or your remainder, 3. And your denominator remains the same. Let's take a look at number 4. Again, we have like denominator of 4, so we add the numerators. 5 plus 7 is 12. Denominator remains the same. This time we have an improper fraction, but it's a much easier improper fraction because if I say how many times does 4 go into 12, or what is 12 divided by, which is what this line means in a fraction, 12 divided by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3, so it simplifies to a whole number or an integer. Let's take a look at number 5. Number 5, we have mixed numbers to add, but they both have a common denominator. So what we need to do is we'll take the two whole numbers, 1 plus 4, and add them. We'll add the numerators, and the denominator stays the same. So 1 1/3 plus 4 1/3 equals 5 2/3. Let's take a look at number 6. Now we're changing to subtraction. Subtraction with like denominators is exactly the same as addition, only you subtract the numerators. So subtract 13 minus 8 and you get 5. Denominator stays the same. Remember that the denominator always stays the same when you're adding or subtracting fractions. Let's take a look at number 7. Again, we have common or like denominators, so we subtract 8 minus 5 is 3. Denominator stays the same. Well, anytime we have the numerator and the denominator the same, we know that the answer is 1 because 3 divided by, remember this line means divided by, 3 equals 1. Let's take a look at number 8. Now, the great thing about when you added mixed numbers was that you could just add the two whole numbers, you could add the numerators, and the denominator stays the same. That is not always the case with subtraction. And so I'm going to show you the way that you should do subtraction until you understand how to differentiate between the ones that will work and the ones that won't. In the case of number 8, We can do it like we did in number 5, only with subtraction. So we can subtract the two whole numbers. 5 minus 2 is 3. 3 minus 1, subtract the numerators, is 2, and the denominator stays the same. However, remember that anytime you're working with fractions, you need to simplify those fractions, and so we can see that 2/4 is the same as 1/2. So we simplify to 3 1/2. Since it doesn't always work this way, sometimes what you will need to do is you will have to change your mixed number to an improper fraction. To do that, we take 4 times 5 plus 3. So 4 times 5 is 20, plus 3 is 23 over 4. Denominator stays the same. Minus, we take 4 times 2 plus 1. So 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9 over 4. Now we subtract our numerators. 23 minus 9 is 14. Denominator remains the same. And because we have an improper fraction, we change it to a mixed number, just like we did up in number 3. 4 goes into 14 3 times, with 2 left over. Denominator stays the same. Simplify. Now, I know that seems a lot harder than what we did here in our first step. But again, sometimes it's not going to work out for you that way. I think I've set all of these up for you to work out without having to do it the hard way. And we can go back over that at the beginning of the year if you don't understand. So let's look at number 9. Number 9 should work out for us. 9 8/9 minus 2 2/9. So we're going to subtract the whole numbers. We get 7. We're going to subtract the numerators and we get 6. And our denominator stays the same. However, we can simplify 6/9. So we have 7 2/3. Remember, the way we do that is that we divide them both by the GCF, and that's going to be 3. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. All right, so that completes the review on fractions with like denominators, or common denominators, as you may have called them in the past. Now let's look at the ones who have different denominators. Number 10, 5/7 plus 1/6. Remember that the first thing you have to do is find the least common denominator. So in order to find the least common denominator, we need to know what is the least common denominator of 7 and 6. There are several ways you can do that. I'm not going to go through those with you right now. Those are things you should have studied in 6th and 7th grade. But once you go through finding the least common denominator, you'll find that the least common denominator of 7 and 6 is 42. So we need to change 7 to 42. In order to change 7 to 42, we have to multiply it by 6. 7 times 6 is 42. So if I multiply the denominator by 6, I also have to multiply the numerator by 6. So 5 times 6 is 30. I also have to change 6 to 42. In order to change 6 to 42, I multiply by 7. So I also multiply my numerator by 7. So 1 times 7 is 7. And then I use my rules for adding fractions with like denominators. So 30 plus 7 is 37. Denominator stays the same. And that's in simplest form. We can't simplify it. Let's take a look at number 11. Number 11 says 2/5 plus 5/8. So the first thing we need to do is find our least common denominator. In this case, our least common denominator is going to be 40. Now sometimes it works out that way where you multiply the denominators and to get your least common denominator, but it doesn't always work out that way. So look for the least common denominator. It will save you steps and keep you from having to simplify as much at the end of the problem. If you don't happen to find the least common denominator, just make sure that once you have a common denominator that you simplify the fraction at the end. So in order to get 5 to 40, I need to multiply by 8. So 5 times 8 is 40, so I multiply the numerator by 8, and 2 times 8 is 16. To get 8 to 40, I multiply by 5, so 8 times 5 is 40. So I multiply the numerator by 5, and 5 times 5 is 25. When I add my numerator, 16 plus 25 is 41. Denominator stays the same. I have an improper fraction, and so I'm going to ask myself, how many times does 40 go into 41? Well, it goes in 1 time. I have 1 left over, because 41 minus 40 is 1. and my denominator stays the same. So 1 and 1 over 40. Let's take a look at number 12. Number 12, we have mixed numbers. So the first thing we have to do is find a common denominator for 1/2 and 5/9. Again, it looks like it's going to be the two multiplied together. So we have 18. And remember, we've got our whole numbers out here. We don't want to lose those. So to get 2 to 18, I multiply by 9. So I multiply my numerator by 9. 1 times 9 is 9. To get 9 to 18, I multiply by 2. So I'm multiplying my numerator by 2. 5 times 2 is 10. Now, here's where we run into a little bit of trouble if we're not careful. Because if you look at this, you can see that 9 plus 10 is going to be 19, and it's going to make this an improper fraction. There are a couple of different ways you can do it. You can either use the process that we used in number 8 to change both of these to improper fractions first, then add them and simplify, or you can add them first and then simplify. It's completely up to you. So let's take a look at it. If I'm going to add first, I'm going to take 2 plus 4 is 6. 9 plus 10 is 19 over 18. Now keep in mind, I've got a 6 out here, right? But now I have 19 over 18, which I know simplifies to 18 goes into 19 one time with 1 left over. Denominator's 18. But I need to add 6 to that because I still have 6 out here. So I get 7 and 1 over 18. We don't have space on here, but what I can do for you is go down to the bottom, and I'll show you how to do it, changing them to improper fractions first. So we have 2 and 9 over 18 plus 4 and 10 over 18. So let's change them to improper fraction, or to, improper fractions first. And it's completely up to you which way you do it. So 18 times 2 is 36, plus 9 is 45. So 45 over 18 plus 18 times 4 is 72, plus 10 is 82. So 82 over 18. So then you have 45 plus 82. So you have 127, or 45 plus 82 is 127 over 18, because remember your denominator stays the same. Now you need to ask yourself, how many times does 18 go into 1? Well, 18 goes into 127 7 times. 7 times 18 is 126. 127 minus 126 has 1 left over, and then 18 as your denominator. So whichever way works best for you. Remember, this is just a review, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through it with you, but you can use either method. All right, let's take a look at number 13. We have 3/8 minus 1/3. So the first thing we need to do is find our least common denominator. That's going to be 24 in this case. So this time the only difference is that we're subtracting. 8 times 3 is 24, so 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 8 is 24. 1 times 8 is 8. So 9 minus 8 is 1. Denominator stays the same. Number 14, our least common denominator is 40. 8 times 5 is 40, so 7 times 5 is 35. 5 times 8 is 40. 3 times 8 is 24. 35 minus 24 is 11, and 40 remains the same. And again, that one's already simplified, so we don't need to do any extra work. 7 1/2 minus 2 6/7. So remember, we've got the 7. We are going to have the common denominator for 2 and 7, which is 14. 2 times 7 is 14, so 1 times 7 is 7. 7 times 2 is 14, so 6 times 2 is 12. Now, if you take a look at this, you can see that 7 minus 12 is going to give us a negative number. So the first thing we have to do here is change these to improper fractions. That's going to be the easiest way. So to change this to an improper fraction, we take 14 times 7, which is 98, plus 7, which is 105. So 105 over 14 minus 14 times 2 is 28, plus 12 is 40. So 40 over 14. So we get 105 minus 40. So we need to subtract those two numbers. You can do that out to the side if you need to. So we get 65 over 14. So our next step is to ask, since we have an improper fraction, how many times does 14 go into 65? Well, 14 times 1 is 14. Now that's not going to work. 14 times 2 is 28. 14 times 3 is 42. 14 times 4 is 56. I think that's probably going to be our best number. So we have 4 times 65 minus 56 is going to leave us with 9 over 14. Okay, let's look at our last problem. We have 8 3/4 minus 1 4/5. First thing we need to do is get our common denominator. So between 4 and 5, the common denominator is 20. So 4 times 5 is 20. 3 times 5 is 15. 5 times 4 is 20. 4 times 4 is 16. Now remember, this is a review, so I'm moving pretty quickly on changing these to common denominators. Now, again, I see 15 minus 16 is going to give us a strange number, so the best bet is to go ahead and change them to improper fractions. So 20 times 8 is 160, plus 15 is 175 over 20, minus 20 times 1 is 20, plus 16 is 36 over 20. So now we need to take 175 minus 36. If you need to do it out to the side, you can do that, or you can do it in your head like I generally do. So when I subtract those, I get 139 over 20. So now what I need to do is say, how many times does 20 go into 139? Well, I know if this was 140, it would go in 7 times, but it's 139, so it's going to go in 6 times. 6 times 20 is 120, so that's going to leave 19 over 20. So there's my answer for number 16. Now that you've been through the review, if you need extra help, remember that there are some links on my website to take you to places like Cool Math, Virtual Nerd, Khan Academy, all kinds of different places where you can get extra help with fractions. Fractions are very important in pre-algebra, so it's very important that you understand them and that you spend the time to learn them, and this summer is the time to do that. We will not spend time on that after the first week of school in August. So now take some time, look at the homework for number 3, homework number 3, and get that completed to bring back with you in August.